Hello, and thank you for joining me once again to another Zoom session, part of our virtual tour of key locations in the country. And today we're going to go to a place which is not always on the map of the groups that come to visit Israel, which is a shame because it should be. It's a place that, at least archaeologically, is must see. It's one of the few locations in the country that you have a continuous expression of the eras in the country. You can read it almost like an open book. You go from era to era. Unlike Megiddo, that was limited in time and served one purpose, a military post. The place that we're going to visit today, Beth-Shan, has an Old Testament part to it, has a New Testament part to it as well. And in one location, we can learn about the country's archaeology, what were the transitions that went from era to era, and that will be our plan for today. As always, we'll take about 35 to 40 minutes to only cover the key issues about Beth-Shan. There's never enough time in such a short session, which I hope that you'll be blessed by the information. Let me start with a quote given by a Jewish sage that visited Beth-Shan in the 14th century and wrote in his memoir that described his journey to the country that Beth-Shan is the gateway to heaven or the gateway to paradise. If that was his impression, there has to be a reason why. And the only logic we can make out of it is the scenery in the area. It's a very beautiful, lush green area. The weather is warm almost all year round, boiling hot in the summertime and pleasant in the wintertime, which guarantees quite an abundance of produce in the area, well irrigated, well cultivated, the eastern part of the plains of Armageddon. And the impression of that sage was that Beth-Shan is the entrance to paradise. Well, we should give it some credit for being a very important location. As always, I'm going to use the presentation. I'll try to fit in one of those little video segments as well from the theater, and I hope that you'll be blessed by the information. Let's bring up the important stuff, so to speak, and we start with a presentation. Let me just enlarge that to what it should be. Okay, here we go. This is the opening page presenting the whole project that I call Israel Seminars. And let's go now to the reason why you're all with me today. The name of the place is Beth-Shan, which means the house of the goddess Shan, the Egyptian goddess, no doubt. And the place was connected to the Egyptians and their dominance over the area, as opposed as a gateway to Egypt for a long time. But what we see today, when you go to see the site, is from the Roman era, and it was given a Greek name. It was called Skytopolis, or the people from Scythia, and we'll speak about the reasons for the name a little later on. And Nisa was a Greek mythology figure. She was the nanny, if you wish, of Dionysus, one of the key deities that was worshipped in this part of the Greco-Roman Empire. I'm going to use the term Greco-Roman quite often. Let me just go back to the other screen because of one main reason. When the Greeks occupied the area, they brought with them their own civilization. They became to be very dominant, not just in this part of the world, but everywhere in what we can call the classical world. When Rome occupied the area, they embraced everything from the Greeks. And for that reason, archaeologists and historians will call that era the Greco-Roman era. Rome was indeed much stronger when it comes to military capacity, but Rome was not that well developed when it comes to philosophy and fine arts, etc. And therefore, they were impressed by the Greek culture. They've embraced all of it, including their religion, into the Roman way of life. And that became to be like a melting pot of lots of civilizations that Rome occupied to create a Roman civilization. And for that reason, the whole era is known by the Greco-Roman era. For example, Israel ended up in the Greek-speaking part of the Roman Empire, and for that reason, Greek was the main language, and for that reason, the New Testament was written in Greek indeed, and not in Hebrew, Aramaic. That was the language of that part of the world. So let's go back now and bring up the slide and speak about Beth-Shan, Skytopolis, and we're going to focus on two main eras, as you see in just a minute, but just remind you of the map. This map is always appropriate to use and to show you the centrality of the land of Israel, the land of Canaan, in the very heart of things. It can be the Egyptians on one side, Mesopotamia on the other side, Assyrians, Babylonians, and sometimes the fault line was not between Egypt and the others, but Rome and Persia, as we mentioned the other lecture. Let me bring up the timetable, the timeline. We're going to speak about the ancient hill, which is connected to the days of King Saul. And this will be one of the few places Beth-Shan is mentioned in the Old Testament. We'll speak about the very important transition to the life of Beth-Shan and the whole region, indeed, when the Greeks occupied the area. They brought with them a whole new way of life that influenced and shaped and changed everything in this part of the world for good. And then we'll speak about the Roman city, and that's what we see when we visit Beth-Shan, Roman and Christian, Roman or Byzantine, and we'll see how the city had to change as a result of the change in religion as well. Well, I'm going to zoom in for just a minute, just skip this one, to the map that you all know so well. And now we're going to speak basically about the map, and we go back to the days of the Old Testament. Here is Beth-Shan, and you do see the road system, you do see the gap in the mountain, the break in the mountains, and just like Megiddo was guarding the southern entrance into the plains of Armageddon, Beth-Shan was guarding the eastern entrance to the plains, and you see how close is Mount Gilboa, which is one of the mountains in Samaria. I do want to bring up something also very important, a fault line that you all see here. This is a geological fault line. It's about 4,000 miles long. That's what creates today the Rift Valley area, and it's an active fault line. So the tablets are in motion on 3 different dimensions. They're moving north and south, east and west, and up and down, and that's the main reason for earthquakes in the area. We'll speak about earthquakes later on because that's what devastated Beth-Shan, and you do understand that all the locations which are close to the Rift Valley area or the fault line will be impacted by an earthquake more than any others, and you see how close is Beth-Shan to that valley basically. But let's speak about the sources. What do we know about Beth-Shan? From which sources? And those of you watching this series are familiar with some of them. We're going to speak about the Execration Texts, that Egyptian habit, so to speak, to write the names of the enemy and smash them down in front of the army on figurines made of clay. And when you find names of Egypt enemies, that will tell you something about what was the political structure in the area and who were the main challenges for the Egyptians. It also teaches us that Egypt was not the only player in the region. Every now and then somebody else took the places. The Egyptian had to launch another attack to reoccupy the place. And Beth-Shan is only mentioned once when it comes to the Execration Texts. We do find the El Amarna tablets, which are the Egyptian Foreign Office archive from the 14th century BC. Beth-Shan is mentioned there once, but again, it indicates the significance of Beth-Shan. We speak about Pharaoh Thutmoses, the Napoleon of Egypt, as he's called, by historians, that led 16 campaigns into the land of Canaan, and one of the main targets was to occupy Beth-Shan. And of course, Shishak, we spoke about him as well, that invaded Israel's territory right after the death of Solomon a few years later in order to take advantage of the division in the united monarchy of the Israelites. And he's also mentioning Beth-Shan as one of the places that he occupied, and they found in the excavations all kind of remains that are mentioning some of the pharaohs like Ramses, the pharaoh of the Exodus, if you'd like, and some of the others as well. So the place was well documented. We know the location beyond any doubt. And this is one of those places that we can say easily, it's not a traditional location, it's not a maybe, we know the location of Beth-Shan. In the Bible, the place is mentioned. The most important one will take us back to the days of Saul, the first king of Israel, and that was the battle that he lost his life in Mount Gilboa. And as the Bible tells us, the next day, the Philistines came back to the battlefield, they found his dead body, and they fastened his body and his 3 sons on the walls of Beth-Shan. Well, the place is also mentioned in the days of Joshua, the days of the judges, as a place that was conquered by the tribe of Manasseh, but they did not settle the area. That's how it became to be an enclave, once again, of Egyptians and Philistines and Canaanites. That's where we meet it in the Bible, in the story of Saul, for example. We also know that when Solomon divided the kingdom to 12 provinces, Beth-Shan is mentioned in the territory of the province number 5. Megiddo was the capital. Beth-Shan was a town on it. I do want to show you down over here how the ancient hill used to look like. It's a tell, a mount, a man-made hill. And I just want to say that when the excavation started, they removed about 17 feet of dirt. The upper layers were removed because the plan of the archaeologists was to excavate, if possible, the layer from the days of Saul. And that was not the top layer. Saul is estimated to be around the beginning of the 10th century BC, and therefore end of the 11th century BC, and therefore this was not the last layer. People lived above that like the Greek town, so these days were removed, so we can stop at the one that represents the days of Saul and to try to learn about this town. You see those reliefs over here, which were coming from the top of the town. That's where the governor's palace used to be, beautifully decorated, and these were found on the top of Beth-Shan. So that's the ancient tale, and you see that's before the excavations of the Roman city were made, about 60 years later. Back now to the map, and I do want to just mention the episode that the Bible speaks about, where it speaks about the death of Saul in Beth-Shan. Well, keep in mind the map for just a minute, and let me go back to that other screen. The Bible doesn't tell us about the big drama that took place in the region in the days of the judges, the days of Saul as king as well. The Philistines occupied a section of the country with Egyptian blessing. These two were allies. The Philistines had a big advantage over the others. The Bible is quick to admit that the Philistines were those that had the knowledge how to make tools made of iron, weapons made of iron. The Israelites did not master that knowledge, not until the days of David, until the days of Solomon. The the Philistines had to have access to iron quarries. In the very same time, there was a battle going on between them and the Phoenicians that became to be very dominant around the Mediterranean Sea, and they fought also for the iron quarries, and the Phoenicians won the battle, which means that the Philistines were cut off from the iron quarries that they used to go to, like Cyprus and Crete, and they were desperate to find iron quarries in the area. As the Bible tells us, only one place in the country had iron quarries, and these were the mountains of Gilead. Because when you read the scriptures, few things don't add up geographically. We are told that the Philistine army gathered in the traditional gathering place that was further down here, because that's the easiest way to climb up to the mountains, to the heart of Saul's kingdom. But then we find them walking around, and Saul is engaging them at Mount Gilboa. The question is, what was the plan? Why not to climb the mountains at the shortest place? Because if you take this long detour, you reveal your intentions to Saul's men. And I bet you that for Saul's intelligence at first, the plan didn't make any sense. And then they understood. The Philistines did not mean in this occasion to invade into Saul's territory. They had a different plan. Their plan was to try to go through Saul's territory, through the plains of Armageddon, in order to seize the iron quarries on the mountains of Gilead. The Bible tells us in 1 Kings chapter 6-9, when Solomon will build the temple, he will make all the tools to build the temple in the iron quarries on the mountains of Gilead. So the Israelites had those places. They did not know how to make iron back then. The Philistines needed a place, and therefore they did not plan to attack Saul's kingdom. It was Saul's plan to try to stop the Philistines before they are getting to the iron quarries. And the battle took place here on Mount Gilboa. Saul lost the battle, as you understand, and the Bible tells us that the body of Saul was fastened to the walls of Beth-Shan. Keep in mind what I showed you only minutes ago, the tale for the 30s was much higher. It went around here, but these layers were removed to stop at the 10th century, and that's how the walls used to look like. And this is a reconstruction how the town that was situated at the top, out at the bottom, also used to look like. So that will be the place in the days of the Old Testament. By the way, 15 acres in size and about 250 feet above the valley. And archaeologists were identifying about 25 to 26 layers, but keep in mind those on top were removed. So today what is standing, what we see, is basically the top of the hill from the 10th century BC, yet so many layers are staying under it. Once again, we speak about a very old location. Let's make some progress now and speak about maybe the most important change that this part of the world has seen, and that was, excuse me, let me take a sip of water for a second. That will be the coming of the Greeks, and that's going to change everything. Need to take a sidetrack for a minute in order to say the following. As many times as the country was conquered by different civilizations, those civilizations did not leave a mark behind. I mean, when the Egyptians led their campaigns time after time to conquer the area, they did not found Egyptian colonies. They did not try to teach the locals what does it mean to be an Egyptian or to worship the Egyptian gods. And therefore, there was no any kind of mingling between the civilizations. They came as an occupying power, and they did not want to mingle with the locals. The mindset was simple. I am victorious. My God gave me victory over people which are inferior, and their God is inferior. And therefore, I'm not going to share my civilization with them. I'm not going to invite them to worship my God, because in the future conflict, my God may change sides and support my enemy against me. And therefore, the Egyptians or the Assyrians or the Babylonians or the Persians, which were the main areas that dominated Canaan or Israel, did not build those colonies, did not try to invite the locals to live their own way of life. The Greeks did, and that was a great change. When Alexander the Great is leaving the peninsula of Greece and Macedonia, he's on a mission, and not just a mission of conquest. Alexander's mission was also to Hellenize the world, to spread the Greek civilization, and the question is, how do you do that? The only way to influence a region and teach them a new way of life is to establish colonies, bring people from the homeland to settle the area, and that will become like a center in order to spread your civilization among the locals. That's exactly what the Greeks did. When it comes to Skytopolis or Beth-Shan, they founded a city that will be called Skytopolis. Skytopolis, therefore, means the city of the Scythians, and Alexander, no doubt, brought some veterans from the army and settled them in this area, which is so important, as you understand. And he was the one that gave the name, most likely. We do not know exactly when Skytopolis was established, but we're going now to speak about the Greek era. But the most ancient thing that was found in the tale, which is connected to the Greek arrival, are coins. And these coins were minted between 249 to 259 BC, 259 to 249 BC. And these are the days of one of the most important Ptolemies. Ptolemy was the one that founded, no doubt, the place, named it Skytopolis, most likely bringing people from the land of Scythia, which is by the Caspian Sea, in order to found a Greek center in the area, to be loyal to the Greeks and to live a Greek way of life. I'm going to show you this little sketch, but from the side, because when we visit today Beth-Shan or Skytopolis, we come from this side. We only see this hill. We don't see another hill as big as this one, which is right behind. So when the Greeks brought over their way of life, and they brought a very high level technology of water engineering, for example. They taught the locals how to build aqueducts. The cities can grow. You're no longer limited to the local springs. It changed everything in the area. And Skytopolis was growing to cover the two hills. And there was a brook in between that carried water from Gideon Spring. Yes, the Gideon Spring. And there was a dam here. And that will be now the water reservoir for a town that occupied the two hills and not just one, as in the days of the Old Testament, but nothing was built around the area. And we do know, for example, that this town was leveled by the Jewish dynasty of the Maccabees, Hasmoneans. In their quest to conquer the land and make it Jewish once again, Hellenistic towns, pagan towns were destroyed, including the town of Skytopolis. Next time the place is built, and built is very impressive, in order to serve a purpose, was with the conquest by the Romans under Pompey the Great. We mentioned him last week when we spoke about the Sea of Galilee. Let me just refresh your memory. Here is a new map now. This map is the outcome of the Roman conquest of the area. The Roman army arrives at 67 BC. Their destination is Egypt, the breadbasket for the Roman Empire. They have to establish a road, a way, that will carry grain from Egypt all the way back to Italy proper. They could not do that by sea, not yet, because the sea was commanded by pirates, not by the Roman Empire, as it will be later on. That was the reason why the Roman army arrived, and Judea became to be an essential link in the grain supply. Rome, you do see that the line between the powers was here now. And once again, Judea is a war zone basically between the two powers. The main problem was that the Jews cannot be trusted. The Romans never really trusted the Jews, and they were simply occupying a section very close to the border. And therefore, it was Pompey that established that Decapolis, a league of 10 cities inhabited by Greeks that were founded after the Hellenic conquest. And one of them was Nisa Skytopolis. Skytopolis will be the capital of the Decapolis. So now we can make a connection even with the Gospels of the New Testament, although it's not mentioned there by name. Some of you may recall Luke chapter 8, but other Gospels as well speak about Jesus healing the demoniac, the man who was possessed by a demon. And after he did, this man is asking Jesus to go with him. And Jesus says, "You're not coming with me, but you go to all the cities of the Decapolis and tell them what you saw." Do you have any doubts in your mind? The first place for this man to go to share the great news would be the capital, Skytopolis. So although the place is not mentioned by name, we can easily make such a connection coming from Gadara on the shores of the lake and going down to Skytopolis to tell the story. And also here's Nazareth. And when Jesus was on his way to Jerusalem, the Bible speaks about multiple such journeys, that was the road to take. The road that was going by Skytopolis and down the Jordan Valley up to Jerusalem. So no, it's not mentioned in the Gospels clearly, but we can make such a connection. And keep in mind about 30% of the population in this country in the days of Jesus was from Greek origin. And therefore, Jesus was well familiar with the Greek way of life, as well as most of his disciples. He's mentioning Greek gods like Hades a couple of times. So we speak about the place that was so central that we have to come to the conclusion it was on the way of Jesus, and the demoniac came here to Skytopolis to share the news of what happened to him, etc. But the most important thing from our story is to understand the location, the vicinity of the border between the superpowers and, of course, the new entity called the Decapolis, that Skytopolis would be basically one part of it. Let's zoom in and speak about the Roman town and how it used to look like. So we started with the Old Testament town that was up here, and then we spoke about the Greek town that covered this hill and the hill behind that we can't even see from here, and now we speak about the Roman one. What you see in front of you is the Roman city that was founded by Pompey the Great. 64 BCE is the year of foundation, and everything that was found in Beth-Shan, including coinage, we're using 64 as the year of foundation, which means, let's say that it says that the Sigma, this theater, right, was established at 507 AD. We do know that 507 doesn't mean from what we call year one today, it means from 64 BCE. All right, so they use that point of reference, 64 BC by our calendar, as the ground zero, if you wish. Everything that was found in the era was dated. We need to add the 64. That was the year that the place was founded. I'm just taking a sidetrack for just 1 minute, and I want to say the following. It will be fair to say to our civilization today, it is based on the Greco-Roman civilization. That's the Western civilization. I'm not speaking about religion. The Greeks donated, if you wish, two main principles to our way of life, and the Romans donated also two, and these are the four pillars that our civilization is standing on. The Greeks gave to us philosophy and fine arts. Rome added law and administration. Without adding religion to that, these will be the four pillars that will make the Western civilization today. And therefore, we speak about the mix. And for that, another reason why the place or why the era is called the Greco-Roman era. So let's go back now to the way that Beth-Shan looks like. You do see the Cardo, which was the main road in the city, which is here. You do see the Decumanus, the crossroad that was here. You see the large agora, that will be the Roman forum or the Greek agora, the main marketplace. There was a building standing here called the Basilica. We see the back wall of the theater. You see the Bathhouse, a must facility in every Roman city. You see a new shopping center that was built, the Sigma. That's how Beth-Shan looks like, but it's not just Beth-Shan. When you've seen one Roman city, basically, you've seen them all. Here is a little schematic plan of how a Roman town usually looks like. We are fortunate today to have a book that was written by a Roman engineer and an architect called Vitruvius, and it gives us a lot of details and information how things were built in the Roman Empire. By the way, Rome was good at one thing that affects our lives even today, standards. Everything was built by one standard. It would be easier to run a big empire like the Roman Empire was. Nobody does whatever he wants. Everybody goes to one school of engineers in the city of Rome. Everybody knows how to build a town. Everybody knows how wide the road is. Everybody knows how high is the column. Everything is done by one standard. And therefore, once you saw one Roman city, you've seen them all because they're very much alike. Vitruvius, for example, gives us a list, a whole protocol, how to select a site to build a town. For example, you go to a certain location and you take people to live there, and these people take notes every day: sunrise, sunset, temperature, wind, from which direction it blows, and they take some animals to graze as well to check if the soil is good for humans. And after a year, usually, you slaughter the animals and you check the liver. If the liver was healthy, that will be an indication that the soil is healthy for humans as well, and they will approve the site. If the liver was not healthy, they'll go to the next location and start all over again. In the case of Beth-Shan, the ancient hill showed the Romans that people lived there, so there was a different procedure. But you need to understand how careful were the Romans. Everything was working by a standard. For example, you do build two main roads that will cross the city to folk waters. In the case of Beth-Shan, you could not go through here because that's what the ancient tale is. So the Cardo Maximus was going like that, bypassing the tale. You do see the crossroad, the Decumanus. And here is the theater, the amphitheater, the basilica, the bathhouse, and the brook of Charo that was one of the water sources, but not the only one. The Greeks and the Romans knew how to carry water from other sources as well in order to bring water to town. So that's how Roman city would look like in most cases. And you do understand, when Romans traveled, anybody else in the empire, you go to a town that you've never been there before. It's easy to be familiar with where to find what, because basically most of them look the same. To make it more interesting, here in Beth-Shan, since it's located in the bottom of a valley, mountains on both sides, you have to deal with the problem and threat of flash floods. Rains in the winter, the water is gushing down the hills. It may go through the city, carrying all the soil. It's dangerous. And for that reason, the Roman engineers were clever enough to collect all the rainwater from the area to one central canal. And this canal was going under the city. I know it's hard to believe, but someplace around here, there was a whole water canal and the water was running under the city into the River Jordan that flows someplace around there. You can follow the mouth as I move it from place to place. So things have to be well calculated and things have to be well prepared. So that's how Beth-Shan or Skytopolis used to look like. Let's go now to the next one. Well, excavations, we spoke about the ancient tale. A team from University of Philadelphia was excavating the top of the hill, removing some of the layers, but most of the excavations took place in about 20-25 years, and that was more than just a university project. In the case of Beth-Shan, knowing how rich and what a great site that would be, and also to solve a social problem, the inhabitants of the local town, Beth-Shan of today, that suffered from a high rate of unemployment were hired for the job. And that was basically a way to support the whole town. Between 400 to 500 people were busy in the excavations for 20 years, and they basically produced what you can see in Beth-Shan today. And this is quite amazing. You understand the challenges? You start working in such a place, you maybe start with a bulldozer. But as you go deeper and deeper, you have to switch your toothbrush. You need to be very careful when you do those excavations. Let's go into some details. Well, here is the main road, the Cardo. A few things I'd like to point out. Number one, you see the combination of two stones in the area. This will be a volcanic soil, a very hard stone called basalt. And this will be limestone. It looks very nice, almost like marble, but it's not marble, well-polished limestone that will decorate the streets. And the Cardo, every Cardo was divided by 2 rows of columns to 3 spaces. That would be out in the open. The sidewalks, as we'll see in a minute, was for pedestrians. That's where the marketplace used to be. But you also see that this is not totally level. That's not the earthquake. It was designed in such a way. Because in this part of the world, every city was designed to be a catchment area, to carry the rainwater from every rooftop and every road to main holes. And these will go down to feed the cisterns. And therefore, everything here was carefully designed. You cannot really see well, but the stones were placed diagonally. So when somebody is carrying a lot of goods and a heavy cart and goes up and down this main road, not to pull out carelessly any of the stone that had to be designed in a certain way. And that would be the sewage. Right under here would the sewage go, a total separation of drinking water from sewage water. Folks, we'll speak about Rome, and we'll speak about a very advanced civilization and a way of life. Let's look at the side of it. That's how it used to look like. You see that even the road was colored by mosaics. Now, that's not very common. One reason maybe is to make an impression about how great is the Roman Empire. The fact that we are very close to the Roman-Persian border, that was a way to just deliver a statement and a message to people that came to visit Rome's territory. How mighty is the empire, how beautiful and how strong is the empire. The way to do that is by creating the right impression of town. People did not know that, but sometimes you will walk along the corridor and you will see amazing facades of buildings with nothing behind. Because it wasn't about functioning buildings, it was about creating an impression. And look at the efforts that were dedicated here. Everything is covered with mosaics. On top of it, later time, even marble. Somebody had to spend a fortune in order to bring marble from far away just to pave the roads. And these are not the fancy villas. We'll speak about the public areas. So we do not know exactly why. We do have a clue, by the way, but we're not really positive. You see the entrances to the shops, and this is only one side. There was another one on the other side. You can easily understand how magnificent this part of town used to look like. So the corridor was absolutely crucial to understand. You see the Diku Mountains, the crossroad. The mirror picture, just take it from a different angle, but the very same idea. As wide as the corridor, usually 70 feet wide, 2 rows of columns, and there was a meeting point for the two, which was basically downtown. That will be the complex now for the Bathhouse, and this will be one of the 3 complexes in the Roman city. You had the entertainment center, you had the cultural center, and you had the commercial center. Commercial center will be the Basilica, the Agora. Entertainment will be the theater, amphitheater, and the cultural one will be the Bathhouse. Well, that was part of the Roman civilization, and without going into too many details, you cannot call yourself a Roman truly unless visiting the Bathhouse is part of your schedule almost every day. Now, that was not a spa. We speak about a sauna. And the question should be, why anybody in his right mind, when the temperature outside is more than 100 degrees, which is the case in Skytopolis for 8 months of the year, would even go to a spa? Well, it wasn't about the temperature. It wasn't about being comfortable. I can ask you the same question from a different angle. Why in the heat of July and August, in Jerusalem, ultra-Orthodox Jewish men will wear long, heavy black coats? It doesn't make sense either. So it wasn't about being comfortable. It wasn't about being adjusted to the climate. It was about what principles you follow. In the case of Rome, Bathhouse was one of them. It was a place for social gathering. It was a place for political intrigue sometimes. And of course, the health issue as well. The Romans knew that sweating a lot will improve your circulation, will clean your body from poison maybe. And that was a place to get together and hang out, just canceling all the division to classes. Everybody was permitted in, and you're not divided to groups of people or classes. You're all part of the Roman civilization. That was another reason why the bathhouse was so important. Just in the city of Rome, there were more than 400 bathhouses, and each one had his own water carrier. Of course, water not of the best quality that was used usually for drinking and irrigation, but they knew the qualities of water. They understood the saltiness of water, and they could decide which spring is going to feed what bathhouse. In the case of Beth-Shan, they found 2. One was in the bad conditions, so just covered it, but this one is a very good one. Well, let me try to explain how it was working. This was covered by the floor. These were not the seats. These were columns that supported the floor. There was a furnace outside with a big bellow attached to that, and somebody had to bellow the hot air from the fireplace under the stones, under the floor, in order to make it as boiling as possible. And every now and then somebody would enter with a jar of water, spit it on the ground, pour it on the ground to make steam. So it was a steam room. Of course, for a few denarii, you can maybe rent a small hot tub and have a massage or something. And outside were the wrestlers practicing, and the athletes came to train, the kids came to watch. It was indeed a very important center for the Roman daily life. And what about the theater? And let me try to bring up one of the things I'd like to share with you when it comes to that and to explain how the theater used to look like. And I hope that you'll get the picture well enough.
The city of Skytopolis numbered about 40,000 people. It was a large Roman city. And just like any other large Roman town, it would have some facilities that were must. For example, a theater. It would have an amphitheater. It would have a horse race arena that was called the Hippodrome. It would have a stadium as well. Right now, we're visiting the complex that was known by the title, the name of theater, to distinguish that from the amphitheater. Most people misuse the term, and therefore it's important to understand the right terminology. The theater is a semicircular structure that people used to come to watch a show. The show was presented on stage, and since the acoustics were important, the Roman engineers had to create a secluded area so the audience could listen what's being said on the stage and to be totally separated from the noise that was right behind the wall, as we were very close to the town center and to the big basilica. And therefore the whole structure was meant to improve the acoustics and to protect the whole area from any kind of outside noise. It was a social center as well. People used to come here to get together, not just to see spectacles, but also for other public events as well. It's interesting to note that the combination of stone that you see around you, the local limestone, which is typical to Galilee, and the beautiful combination with the black basalt that was brought from mountains not that far away from here, the heights of Issachar and the Golan Heights as well, gave the city and gave the theater a very interesting appearance of the combination of black and white. The theater, this one numbered could seat about 8,000 people, and as archaeology said, is proven, there was a whole other section, maybe made of limestone, that was missing. It was big in the 2nd century, and inscription was found not far away from here that speaks about the 2nd century as the century that the theater was built. And it's a classical example here in Israel, maybe the nicest one that was found. There was others, like the one in Caesarea that was reconstructed. This one is almost all authentic, except for the corner that you see at the far area over there that was reconstructed just to give an impression how beautiful and how splendid that theater used to be.
Well, I hope that went well. You're able to follow it. It was smooth, because when we did the live lecture, it wasn't working that well. So maybe this time it went okay. Let's just carry on and bring up the last few minutes of the presentation. So we're going back now to the theater. We spoke about how important that was as one of the manifestations of the Roman way of life or empire. You do see once again, these columns are made of granite, which means that lots of money was dedicated to make that as splendid as possible. Interesting to note, and we're not going to dedicate a lot of time to that, but the transition of the Roman Empire from pagan way of life to Christianity changed the city's appearance totally. In a Christian town, of course, you will not find all any manifestations of Rome. You're not supposed to find bathhouses. Think about that. The people go and spend naked all day long through, not together, men and women. Although, when you read the teachings of Cicero, that was in the Days of the Republic, he's mentioning sometimes that consuls, to find favor in the eyes of the locals and maybe be elected before they were holding office, would permit that. And he was all against that. But of course, later on, there was total separation. So do understand that the Christian town doesn't look like a Roman town. You will not find temples in a Christian town, you will find churches. You will not find theaters, or the shows that you're going to see will be more of biblical content and not the usual comedies or tragedies from the Greco-Roman world. You will not find the amphitheaters and gladiators butchering one another. That will be taken out as well. Interesting, but with all the changes, the last thing that the Roman pagans gave up was the bathhouses. Bathhouses were used long and deeper into the Christian era. It was very hard for them to give up the bathhouse, but many of the others were taken out long before that. And it's interesting to note that the theaters, and this is kind of one of the things that we need to understand, were the first place of gathering for the local population. It wasn't in churches. There were no churches yet as buildings, not as the body of believers. And therefore, the first place that those pagans heard the word of God was most likely in theaters. Before the show started, and the show would be of a biblical content, the local priest will come on stage, will open the book and read in the beginning. And only later on that will change as well, and theaters will be totally out. But that revolution that Constantine the Great led had to be taken step by step. You do understand the challenge. How do you approach 15 million Romans? And you need to minister to every individual. That's not easy to do. So everything was changing basically from the Roman pagan town to the Christian town. But again, I don't want to go into too many details. It will take a long time. And therefore, let's make some progress. This is the Amphitheater of Skytopolis, an oval structure, as you can see, that was also used for the horse race arena or the chariot race arena, the hippodrome, all depends on the size of it. You can clearly see that the first row of seats is up here, about 10, 15 feet above the arena. You don't want to sit too close to hungry lions, obviously. You see the entrances to the cages, that's where the wild beasts were kept, and the gladiators. And when you complete the 12 rows of seats it had all around, it will seat close to 8,000 people as well. So that will be another mass facility that you see in Roman cities. Look at that, public latrines. And you think that we are so sophisticated. Well, the Romans had it as well. And they found more than one. This one was outside the theater. Of course, you want to build those facilities, and these could accommodate close to 60 people at the time, all right? You want to find them by the places of the large gathering. So coming out of the theater, going into the theater, by the basilica, that's where we find the public latrines. Without too many details, there were two water canals. One was going right along the wall that was much deeper and was dug in an angle, which means water can flow very quickly, and the current will be quick enough to carry the waste as well. You're missing here pieces of wood with holes in them, and here water was running just to wash your hands. So hygiene was maybe not at the highest level, but this was something they also considered. That's how the public latrines used to look like. And then, of course, the earthquake. We'll speak about the main destruction. We'll speak about a few earthquakes that Beth-Shan suffered from, and let's just go over some of them. Just nice pictures of the Beth-Shan. By the way, the columns were not found in the upright positions, you understand. The columns had to be replaced like that. Everything was found on the floor, and you can tell by the direction that everything was pointing to the north, which means you can actually see to which direction the tablets were moving when the final earthquake came. Let's have a word about the earthquakes, and this will be, we just mentioned that, the importance of the theater in that transition from paganism to Christianity. Look at the outcomes of the earthquake. You do see how those major columns kind of collapsed. Look at the capitals, Corinthian style. That will be literally downtown. That will be the Caudo, the Decumanus. That will be the town center. The hill, the tail is on your left-hand side, and the main Caudo went like this, bypassing the hill, and went all the way down to the gates of town. We have three major earthquakes which were recorded in Beth-Shan's history. The first one was 363. There was an opportunity as well, because in this earthquake, everything that collapsed and was of a pagan nature was not rebuilt. The stones were reused to build Christian facilities like churches. So that earthquake, in a way, helped the whole process of taking down the pagan town and rebuild Beth-Shan as a Christian town. Now, I'm skipping this one, but the most important one that led to all the devastation that condition the city is at today was in the 18th of January, 749. The city collapsed. It was already 100 years in Muslim hands, but the Muslims did not change much in Beth-Shan. They just moved in without adding anything to it. And after the city did collapse, look at this massive column. This one is 40 tons, all right? This size of it breaking into three. It wasn't one monolith that broke into three. That would be about 40 tons. Think about the skills that you need just to quarry it out, move it from place to place, and bring it to the upright position. That was quite an accomplishment as well. So this earthquake is believed by scholars also to devastate Capernaum and Chorazin and Bethsaida, the three towns that Jesus proclaimed judgment upon in Matthew 11. Maybe it was the same earthquake that leveled those cities because they also were located in the Rift Valley area. Well, that will be for today. And I hope that you enjoyed the presentation, and my point was just to give you a taste, right? You can spend time and time in Beth-Shan. It's such an important location archaeologically, and you can really go from place to place and look at the detail, the beautiful mosaics, the inscriptions. You can really learn a lot about the place. In the summertime, they have a very nice sound and light show they put out in the evenings, and it's another option. When you come to Israel, all right, and you do not include that site in your tour, sometimes try to do the best, right? Have a need to be convinced that you want to include Beth-Shan on your tour. It will simply help you to put all the dots together. When we are traveling around the country, even in this virtual tour that we are taking, we're not following any kind of sequence. We're going from place to place, and every now and then you need to pause, connect all the dots together, and just tell the story chronologically. Well, Beth-Shan is the place to do that. I hope that you enjoyed the presentation. Maybe you learned some new things. And I always want to bless you. May the God of Israel richly bless you until we meet next time. Thank you all. Bye-bye.